Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Managing a working workforce during any period of transition can be a difficult process, even during the best of circumstances. Through the course of the past 15 months, businesses have found themselves amid a constant transition, adjusting operations to address the pandemic's continuously evolving implications on the workforce and the very nature of how work gets done. Here to discuss how employers can approach a post-pandemic workforce, we have Deb Hughes, Senior Vice President at Nasdaq-listed ADP, focused on human resources and return to office. It's great to have you with us, Deb. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Thank you so much, Jill.
And Deb, the pandemic has clearly brought tremendous change to the workforce. As companies continue to navigate this change, what are you seeing as the most critical needs in order to move toward managing a hybrid workforce?
Yeah, safety should always remain the priority. Employers need the right tools that will give them the ability to enable a safe return to the workplace, while some may continue to choose to work from home. So making sure you're engaging and hearing from workers during this transitional time is also critical. Tools like ADP's Return to Workplace dashboard allows companies to send short surveys to collect employee and worker readiness and sentiment about returning to the workplace. Leaders can also monitor availability, get health attestation results, identify and schedule workers based on availability, location, job title, and other attributes. So it's really helpful when you think about that hybrid return. The need for flexibility will continue to be front and center as businesses and employees move forward in this recovery time.
You bring up a great point about flexibility with employees. With that in mind, how should companies approach their teams?
Yeah, leading with empathy and patience. Remember, it was a big change when we went out. It's going to be a big change coming back. So it really remains a priority for us to be listening and to be empathetic and to be patient with people through that change. It's been a very fluid situation overall, and it will continue to be fluid. So, people are having to establish new routines again. So keeping an empathetic approach to everything you say and do is so important. I'd say even from a pure human perspective, employees must ensure that they're putting in the right systems and tools in place for that protection, but also to communicate with purpose. This is not the time for confusion. This is the time for clarity. Tools like Standout give employers and workers an ongoing space to stay connected. It gives you a chance to identify near-term priorities, but also gives you a chance to talk about things that honestly we're not talking about because we're not bumping into the hallway and with each other in the hallways as we used to. When you're not seeing each other as often as we did, offering a variety of ways to stay in touch on what's important is vital.
And ADP is known to have a trusted source of data on the workforce. How do you see data being used in the post-pandemic workplace?
Yeah, people data has never been more important, right? By that, I mean having the right data and actionable insights about your people, because it allows you to make informed decisions about your teams. For example, diversity, pay equity, inclusion have taken on even more significance, in the past year, and we need to lean in on building more diverse and equitable workplaces to attract and retain the best talent. We are in a talent war, we know that. Additionally, we also know, we were talking about hybrid. In this post-pandemic workplace, we're going to have some in-office employees and some remote. So it's more important now than ever that we're able to leverage better data and better decision-making with that data for things like who to hire and how to support high employee engagement. Employers are going to look at tools and technologies like those ADP has developed to provide guided analytics. It makes it easier for us to answer common business questions, especially if you're not an analytics expert like me, not. It really helps that so that we can share those insights with the people who need it the most.
A big narrative we've been seeing is how women have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. How can companies better support women in a post-pandemic workplace?
Yeah, I think first businesses have to acknowledge and address the imbalance. And this starts with looking at all the barriers at work for women and things like, what are the processes, the practices, the expectations, either expressed or implied, that organizations have regarding employees? Do they need to change or evolve? What flexibilities do employees need to balance the work and personal responsibilities? Are we creating the kind of career paths that women could leave the workforce and return? Are we doing that? Those are the things that I would be thinking about. Gender inequity isn't a new challenge. Rather, I think it's been magnified through the last health events. And we need to have a plan now to envision the new normal at work.
And mental wellness has also been a big concern this year, and workers are juggling work and personal demands all within their home setting. How can employers help support workers' mental wellness, again, in the past pandemic workplace?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very critical topic. And, organizations have to understand there's a business case for investing in employee mental wellness and making it a priority. One immediate thing to look at is your standing benefits program. Do you have the kind of support for mental health coverage? Do you have the paid time off policies? Do you have the employee assistance programs? So those are the things that I would be thinking about. In addition to that, more importantly, it all starts with compassion and communication, approaching a workforce with empathy and keeping the lines of communication open.
You raise a good point about the need for communication to be open. What should employers be cognizant of about when communicating big changes with employees?
Yeah, there's a couple things that I would suggest. Right now it's excessive noise. There's so many ways that we're getting communicated at. And so, the information that isn't applicable immediately is probably just going to end up being noise. So really think about what's relevant and timely, or else it's just going to be ignored. So I think of it as a just-in-time approach. What information do people need right now in order to make decisions for themselves? Unexpected outcomes, like people do not like sudden policy changes. They really need to be able to kind of absorb. So think about how you're communicating along a way, and also leverage your people leaders. Let your people leaders know first the changes, so they're there to catch when employees have questions. Another one is around information and consistency, meaning lots of people try to communicate, but if they use different language, if they use different words, if they don't communicate this in a similar way, that could be really confusing. So we try to use a surround sound, right? It's one message, but communicated in different ways. And then the last thing I would say is, by themselves, these things are minor, but it's when you pull all these things together. Remember, everyone is seeing so many headlines and not reading the detail. Conciseness and clarity with warmth and empathy is key to communicating effectively during these times.
And what's the best approach to avoiding those kinds of issues?
Yeah, I think of it as like this 5-factor method. First, identify North Star. Alice in Wonderland said, if you don't know where you're going, it doesn't matter which road you take. So know your destination, know the goal of your communication. Second, responsible transparency. People think transparency is the ideal. No, it's not the ideal, because that would sound like all the discussion should also be communicated. No, that would just cause people to be stressed out and confused. Responsible transparency is giving people the information they need to make decisions. Making sure your insights are actionable, there's lots of information that's interesting, but what's actionable. Making sure that you're consistent with your communication so people can trust when you're going to communicate, where you're going to communicate. And then think of all the different ways that people are now communicated to, and leverage those ways: email, text, town halls, leader-led meetings. Really use that omni-channel approach.
What's the role of human resources in redesigning the workforce moving forward from both the C-suite and employee perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will take the C-suite first and then go to the employees. So I think there's 3 questions we really can ask the C-suite when we're working and partnering with each other. Is this the right time? So is the communication we want to share, is the change we want to offer, is this the right time to communicate that? And how would we communicate that? Another thought is this the right approach? Like in terms of communication, sometimes you don't have the technology to do to communicate in a certain way, or you might not have C-suite support. So let's make sure that we're talking about that ahead of time before we communicate. And is this the right goal? You're not going to get to your destination without a plan. Making sure that you have a goal and the plan to get there, and then you're communicating all along the way. And one of the things that I would really share is that for especially the hybrid, and we talked about that a little earlier, we're going to have these in-office employees, we're going to have remote employees. So we need to think about what's working, what has worked along this path and what will work, and engage tools like Standout to help us stay engaged as a team and leverage that engagement pulse to do that.
And for the employee?
For the employee, well, you know, it's now even more critical for HR teams to ask employees what they need to stay connected. Remember, all these things are coming at employees at the same time. So what's really working? Is it regular in-person meetings? Is it virtual meetings? It's visual communications. Like, is this the time for PowerPoint? Is it not the time for PowerPoint? Using mobile when we can. Are there ways that we can use that more effectively? We really also need to create guidelines that really connect all of us across the diverse voices and experiences that we have across our enterprise, from the frontline associates or employees through your mid-level managers, who, by the way, are oftentimes the people who are asked the most for information, to your most senior leaders. Right now is the time when we really need to think about what we've learned through this pandemic and through the difficulties here about what it's like to have half of your people at home and half your people in the office, and maybe try something different, try something new. So listening is really important.
All right, Deb, appreciate the insight. Thanks so much for your time today. Any last pieces of advice for HR and senior leaders handling our new environment?
Yeah, I would say, you know, change is constant and it's hard. I like to say that the only people who like change are wet babies, and they're really not that happy either. So we need to recognize that this process will not be quick. We need to give each other some space to figure it out. And the other thing I would say is, and I hope this came through the entire conversation, leading with patience, compassion, and communication is the key to maintaining and building a successful organization going forward. The ability to listen with empathy will prove to be your strongest asset.
All right, Deb, thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thank you.